There's a new twist tonight in the shocking revelation that the military conducted secret human testing in St. Louis. The sociologists gathered the documents about the chemicals sprayed in parts of the city during the 50s and 60s. Now, one of the unsuspecting test subjects is suing. Tonight, Ashley Yarkin has the new developments as part of our continuing I-Team investigation. Ashley?
Mike, the testing here in St. Louis mostly surrounded the government housing complex Pruitt-Igoe, where more than 20,000 people lived at any given time. But since this happened over several years, we could be talking about hundreds of thousands of people who were affected. And now one of those former residents has decided to do something about it.
They were tall. The Pruitt-Igoe was 11 stories high.
Pruitt-Igoe was Benjamin Phillips' home during much of his preteen and teenage years. At 62, he finally learned about its history, which was nearly lost when the structure was demolished in 1972.
I was upset. I mean, here we are like guinea pigs.
What he learned is that Dr. Lisa Martino Taylor recently completed her dissertation regarding secret government testing using zinc cadmium sulfide, which was sprayed in impoverished areas like Pruitt-Igoe as part of a biological weapons program. What residents would see and not understand until now were men in protective suits on roofs with machines spewing those chemicals.
My mother passed from cancer. I had a little sister who was born in Pruitt-Igoe who suffered from Down syndrome. There was a sister who only lived for less than a couple of months who died right after childbirth. I had a tumor that was developed in my left ear.
Phillips now believes their health issues and the testing are linked. Beside him is his attorney, who helped Phillips file a lawsuit against California-based Parsons Company, a government contractor known to have conducted the tests. SRI International, which supposedly designed an air sampling unit to be used in the aerosol studies. And Monsanto, which allegedly knew of the plans and offered the government use of its St. Louis plant.
Yeah, I was a little surprised.
While Dr. Martino Taylor didn't expect the suit, which Phillips expects to become class action, she believes it'll help uncover what she could not, such as what exactly was sprayed, and even without required consent of the subjects, why was it done?
We tend to dismiss it as it happened so long ago and it shouldn't have happened, but times were different. But in fact, times aren't so different in that regard. We still have the same types of protections, which means that we have the same types of weaknesses in our policy.
I reached out to all three companies named in the lawsuit. Parsons would not comment. SRI International has not found any evidence that linked it to the project, and I never heard back from Monsanto.
A recent I-Team investigation showing how the Army experimented on unsuspecting St. Louisans in the 1950s and 60s has been getting worldwide attention. Missouri's 2 U.S. senators are demanding more information, but so far the Army remains silent. The problem for the government is that survivors remember, and for the first time, they are telling their stories to investigative reporter Lisa Zigman. Lisa?
Those selected for this testing want to tell their stories, but the government has shown no interest. So tonight, we are giving them a voice. In the early days of the Cold War, the Army arrived in St. Louis and began spraying zinc cadmium sulfide on children and families who lived in and around the Pruitt-Igoe housing projects.
They said we were living in the project, but we were the project.
No one questioned why the Army placed chemical sprayers on the backs of cars and the tops of buildings. Many thought they were killing mosquitoes.
Why would you do that when you know you was not spraying for bugs? You was spraying for people.
These are some of the grown children exposed to zinc cadmium sulfide, now in their 60s.
I remember the soldiers coming and taking chains and chaining the box, the black box, to the light post.
Dorothy Johnson and her doctors never knew what caused blisters to boil up and cover her body when she was just 18. The lifelong emotional scars never healed, and she wonders if there is a connection to the secret testing.
They isolated me, and I stayed there about a month to recuperate. I lost my fingernails, toenails, the lesions on my body. Eventually, they fed me intravenously. I couldn't see well. They had to keep me in the dark.
It doesn't sound possible.
We were playing, and we ran in a house because we saw these guys in the alley in spacesuits. And that's what we called them. Now I know they were hazard suits.
These women who never met share similar stories and illnesses.
I remember the trucks coming by. I remember the men on the roof.
In the 90s, the Army admitted to Cold War spraying and even confessed to planting a cover-up that they were testing a smokescreen to protect cities in case of an aerial attack from the Soviet Union. The Army insisted the spray was harmless.
This is linked to the development and testing of weaponized radiation.
Sociologist Lisa Martino-Taylor has spent years researching the St. Louis testing and has gathered thousands of now declassified documents. She says cadmium would have been toxic enough, but government documents show a link between the St. Louis testing and military-funded human radiation experiments. The military now admits to some horrific Cold War human experiments around the country. A handful of hospital patients were secretly injected with plutonium. Babies and pregnant women unknowingly received radioactive iodine. And from 1946 to 1953, 73 mentally disabled children in Massachusetts were fed oatmeal containing radioactive calcium. Yet much of what happened in St. Louis remains shrouded in secrecy.
Not only was data missing, data had been deleted.
In 1972, the government destroyed Pruitt-Igoe.
What is it that made this study so classified that they're still not talking today about it?
Decades later, questions haunt these survivors. Could the chemical spray have caused their degenerative bone disease or the cancer that plagues them and their families?
That one of the types of cancer I had was papillary carcinoma, which the surgeon said to me when at first I was diagnosed, he said, "Did you have any radiation exposure?" And I said, "Not that I know of."
These women haven't forgotten, and they vow to keep talking about what happened now that someone's listening. Do you trust the government?
It's betrayal. I feel absolutely betrayed.
I know this has gone on in other countries, but I thought that our country was a little bit better than that.
Whether radioactive material was used remains an open question. What is not in dispute is the Army selected the poor and the powerless and exposed them to potentially harmful chemicals without their knowledge or consent. After our initial report aired last month, Missouri's U.S. Senators Claire McCaskill and Roy Blunt wrote to the Secretary of the Army demanding more information. The Army has yet to respond. An Army official told me they'd first respond to the senators before making any statement to the media.
So, Lisa, do we know how much zinc cadmium sulfide was sprayed in the St. Louis area?
Well, a lot of data is missing, but according to the National Research Council, between 1963 and 1965, more than a ton of this chemical was sprayed here. And the truly horrific part of these programs is that people had no idea that they were being used like human lab animals.
So what happens next?
Well, we wait to hear if there's going to be public hearings from the U.S. government, and we wait to hear from the Army.
I'm sure there'll be more reporting. Lisa, thank you very much. This next story is so unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true. But after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the United States military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people in the city of St. Louis. A local sociologist will make her findings public tomorrow, but she spoke first to the I-Team's Lisa Zigman.
Lisa Martino-Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles.
These Army archive pictures show how the tests were done in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1960s. In Texas, planes were used to drop the chemical, but in St. Louis, the Army placed chemical sprayers on buildings and station wagons. City officials were kept in the dark about the tests. The Cold War cover story was that the Army was testing smoke screens to protect cities from a Russian attack. The truth, according to Martino-Taylor, was much more sinister.
It's pretty shocking. The level of duplicity and secrecy. Clearly, they went to great lengths to deceive people.
By making hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests, she uncovered once classified documents that confirmed the spraying of zinc cadmium sulfide. The greatest concentration of this compound was sprayed near the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex just south of downtown St. Louis.
It was home to 10,000 low-income people, and an estimated 70% were under the age of 12.
Martino Taylor claims they all unknowingly inhaled this compound morning, noon, and night so the government could measure its effects on their lungs.
So this was in violation of all medical ethics, all international codes, and the military's own policy at that time.
In 1994, then Congressman Richard Gephardt asked the Army to open its records and explain the St. Louis testing.
We want to make very sure that nothing went on that would harm anyone and that all the facts are out on the table.
Documents released in the 90s show the Army placed sprayers on this former Knights of Columbus building on Lindell and in Forest Park. The Army always insisted the chemical compound was safe. Martino Taylor believes documents prove otherwise.
There's a lot of evidence that indicates that people in St. Louis, in the city, particularly in minority communities, were subjected to military tests that was connected to a larger radiological weapons development and testing project.
For the first time, she links the St. Louis testing to a company called U.S. Radium, a company notorious for lawsuits involving radioactive contamination of its workers.
United States Radium had this reputation where they had been found legally liable decades prior for producing a radioactive powdered paint that killed many young women who painted fluorescent watch dials.
While the Army admits it added a fluorescent substance to the zinc-cadmium compound, details of whether it was radioactive remain secret. Documents uncovered to date indicate the Army never conducted follow-up studies to see whether the compound caused long-term health issues. In 1972, after years of crime, poverty, and decline, the government destroyed the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex. Lisa Zigman, News Channel 5, I-Team.
Now, the company U.S. Radium no longer exists. Martino Taylor has placed all of her research, including the declassified documents, online, and will link you to that data at ksdk.com. Now, she will make all of her findings public tomorrow at St. Louis Community College Merrimack campus. In the meantime, if you remember the spraying, the I-Team's Lisa Zigman would like to hear from you. You can email her at lzigman@ksdk.com.